Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Marc Givler, joined by Chip Minnich. As always, we're done with capsules. We're no more capsules. Not until at least after the spring.
Right.
So you guys can relax. This will be focused on the entirety of the Big Ten. This episode, we have what I think is a very interesting episode, and this is something we'll be able to update throughout the calendar year as different cycles happen in the college football calendar. We are ranking every Big Ten coach from 1 to 18 or 18 to 1, however you want to look at it, in terms of their job security. So this is the Big Ten coaching hot seat meter. We have ranked all of them. Chip and I each have our own lists. Some of them are the same. Some of them are different. We're going to discuss it. We're going to break it down. We're going to explain ourselves a little bit. But yeah, let's get into it. We're going to start. I think this is the best way to do it. If you guys would prefer in the future we go the opposite direction first, let us know in the comments. But we're going to start with the most secure and work our way all the way down to 18 to the least secure job situation in the Big Ten right now going into spring football. We may update this like around fall camp. I don't know if there will be enough activity for that, but we'll certainly update it during the season, probably around the 4 or 5 week mark of the season. As things start to play out. And then, of course, we may be able to update it multiple times during the season as the carousel starts to go. But Chip, before we dive into like who our most secure guy in the conference is, how difficult was this for you to put together? Was it easy? Was it, kind of rate how difficult this was for you?
I'd say it was a challenge. I feel obviously very confident in the fact that some of the coaches, in terms of where they are and being most secure compared to the least secure, that middle was where I really struggled, because it kind of, and this is meant with all respect to all the different fan bases, when you start thinking about, okay, I could see putting this person over another one and then kind of evaluating what I did. I don't know if it's cheating, but I kind of looked at what the contract buyout would be and then started thinking, trying to put myself in the mindset of that respective athletic director or university president's mindset. Like, could we really stomach to pay X to not have this coach around? So that's where I really struggled. It was the middle. That's kind of where I'm really looking forward to our viewers letting us know, okay, I think you guys are completely off the mark. I definitely would have rated this person more so or less than others. So that's kind of where I'm really looking forward to viewer feedback.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There was like the bottom 3 or 4 were pretty easy. The top 5 or so were pretty easy for me in terms of grouping them. And then it became a nightmare from there, where it's like, okay, like buyouts, as you said, came into it for me. Like there's one guy who I think probably should be one of the 2 or 3 least secure, but I had to move him up a few spots because of the enormous buyout. There's a couple guys, like I don't even agree that they should really be on the hot seat, but I've got them kind of down there a little bit because of maybe fan base expectations, program tradition and what the traditional expectations are, things like that have kind of played into this for me a little bit as well. Some guys who maybe should be a little hotter seat maybe got a little bit of break for me, because I don't think the fan base puts the pressure on the administration the way some other fan bases do. So a lot of that went into it for me as well. But yeah, like before we get started here, let us know either if you want to rank them all 18, that'd be awesome in the comments. If you want to do your own like top, 1 to 18, that'd be amazing. But even if not, like just go in the comments and tell us who you're a fan of and kind of where you think within the Big Ten they should be in terms of their seat. Is it really hot? Is it really cold? Is it, somewhere in the middle? Kind of give us at least give us your take on your head coach and kind of where you think he should fit into all this, and where you think we put them in terms of, where we right or wrong with your own head coach. So, okay, let's start. The person we agree on this one, so this is gonna be one. This is both our number 1 most secure job. And you know what? I almost didn't put him here, but I just couldn't bring myself to not, because he just won the national championship.
Right.
It is Ohio State's Ryan Day. I could probably make the case for a couple other guys here, just because, again, when you start talking about fan base expectations, like if Ryan Day goes 8, I don't think they're going to, but if Ryan Day goes 8-4 this year, don't they just throw out the national title? Like, don't they just go out on an absolute rampage if he goes 8-4 with another loss to Michigan? And now Ryan Day is no longer anywhere near the top of this, but I had to. He's got the highest winning percentage in college football. He just won the national championship. Chip, we both had him here. Your thoughts on Ryan Day being at the top?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the contract buyout, he just signed a massive extension that in the back of my mind, that was always going back to in November when the fan base that was very vocal about getting rid of him. In the back of my mind, I kept saying to myself, it's not going to happen because that contract buyout, Ohio State did not want to pay it. So when you add in the fact that he did win a national championship and he got the contract extension, the contract buyout looms even larger. So I think Ryan Day is completely secure. I think the moves he made this offseason with the coaching staff and some of the things that just kind of his general mindset is that he kind of gives me, for the first time in a while, kind of I don't want to say that he's completely relaxed, because I don't think you ever can be as the head coach at Ohio State. But I think he's probably, the fact that he's won the national championship, I think this is probably the most secure and comfortable that he's felt in a while, knowing that he won the national championship. He's got a coaching staff of his own design in place. So now when he said, let's go win another one, I think he's kind of attacking with a new energy and a new comfort.
Yeah, ultimately, because this is kind of a real-time look at things, and we can like I said, if they get off to a bad start, they get crushed by Texas, and they go lose to like Washington or something on the road, and we can move him down from here. But for me, like there's like, I looked at this list, and there's like 4, maybe 5. I would argue the top 5 on my list like can't be fired after this coming season, unless there's a scandal.
Exactly.
Like, unless there's a scandal off the field, something that goes on. Like there's almost nothing my top 4 or 5 can do this fall that would get them fired. There's things they can do that would get them on the hot seat going into next year, into 26, but there's nothing any of these guys can do this season on the field that would actually get them fired. So Ryan Day 1, we have the same number 2.
Yes.
That is Oregon's Dan Lanning, coming off an undefeated regular season, Big Ten championship, playoff berth. Chip, your thoughts on Dan Lanning?
Similar to what I just said about with Ryan Day. He's got the comfort of a new contract that has him feeling very secure. And we've made no secret about this, that Oregon, I know it was a very disappointing and abrupt end to the 2024 season, but they're well positioned to be in the national championship conversation in 2025 with what they did in the transfer portal, as well as with the recruiting efforts. So I think Oregon fans should be extremely excited about having Dan Lanning on the sidelines for the foreseeable future in a very comfortable situation.
Yeah, I mean, he's rolling on recruiting right now. They're just they're just so well positioned for the next 5 or 6 years to be a national championship contender like every year. There are so few programs you can say that about. There's like 4 of them, maybe, and Oregon and Ohio State are 2 of them. That are just like, you look at them and it's like, geez, they're going to be in this thing like every year the next 5 years, barring some type of catastrophe. So I agree, Dan Lanning. I think he's I've had him as a rising coaching star since he was at Georgia as an assistant, like just a guy who has dominated kind of every opportunity he's been given. So I think Oregon fans and administration are incredibly happy with Dan Lanning, and I don't foresee that changing anytime soon. Number 3, again, we agree here. I promise we will start disagreeing soon. Actually, right after this one, we will start disagreeing.
Exactly.
But number 3, Curt Cignetti, Indiana. I could have put him at 2. I think he bought an insane amount of credibility, an insane amount of leeway with the fan base, with the administration, for having was it the greatest football season in Indiana? I mean, we're going back. We have to go back decades, right? Like legitimately, we have to go back decades for an Indiana football season that was as good as the one they had last year. And he did that in year 1. So you're not going to pull a plug on a guy who just did that in year one anytime soon. So I think he has bought himself like an insane amount of leash. So your thoughts on Cignetti and him slotting in here at 3?
I agree with what you just said about how he bought himself an insane amount of leash. As somebody who can recall the previous, I guess you would say, the high water mark for Indiana football, I do remember when Bill Mallory was the head coach in Indiana, and I do remember darkest day one, and when Bill Mallory had Indiana routinely competing for I don't want to say a premier bowl game, but not they would get to a bowl game and not by the skin of their teeth. Like they would have 8-win seasons and 9-win seasons, and Indiana was content with that. And then somewhere along the way, the administration back then decided, okay, I think we can do better. They kind of nudged Bill Mallory into retirement, and lo and behold, it's been kind of wandering in the wilderness up until they got Curt Cignetti, which is why what I've said earlier about Ryan Day as well as Dan Lanning, I think that they were very eager to get a long-term contract extension with Curt Cignetti to ensure what they believe is stability at the position, what they envision is long-term success at the position. So I completely understand where you came from, thinking that Curt Cignetti could possibly be at number 2, but I agree with you. I think he's well positioned to to do good things at Indiana, especially with that contract that he signed last winter.
All right, here's where things start to get a little different.
Yeah, just a little.
Number 4. Chip, who do you have there?
Okay, for number 4, this is purely based on the contract buyout, and I can see. I'm anxious to hear your logic behind this, but this is more based upon the fact that, with Kirk Ferentz, and maybe my math is wrong, but just in terms of Googling this, it looks like he has a $42 million buyout. I realize that there are Iowa fans who are eager to turn the page on Kirk Ferentz, but I also kind of taking the mindset of Iowa administration. Do I really believe that they would want to open up their checkbook and open up, write out a check for $42 million? I think it's more likely that they're going to allow Kirk Ferentz to ride off into the sunset and of his own volition choose, okay, I've had enough. And that's when Iowa will be like, okay, good. We didn't have to write that big check. So that's kind of where I was thinking, is that's why I had Kirk Ferentz as my number 4.
Yeah, so I'll go into he's not my number 4. I'll respond real quickly, and then I'll kind of go into more depth when he comes up on my list. But I see a similar reasoning to what you see in terms of him. He's higher on my list. Again, we're basing this on what we perceive reality to be, not so much what our personal choices would be. Like for me, his seat would be quite a bit warmer than what I actually have him ranked. I don't think his seat's that hot. I don't get the sense the administration really pushes him that much. I mean, we're talking about a program that has 2 coaches since 1979 or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. That's basically
not a program that fires coaches.
Right. And they did. I mean, and that's kind of, with Hayden Fry, it was similar to what I just said, as it relates to when it came to Bill Mallory. And again, little different circumstances, but Hayden Fry, there were times where Iowa went to the Rose Bowl, and Hayden Fry sometimes had Iowa. I remember Iowa being quarterbacked by Chuck Long and ranked number 1, and they came into Ohio State, and Chris Spielman and Pepper Johnson had a great game and defeated the then number 1 ranked team in the country. My point being is that they let Hayden Fry kind of, when he decided it was time to hang him up, that's when he was done. And lo and behold, they went out and hired Kirk Ferentz, and he had some rocky moments at first, but then he got Iowa into a consistent competitive program. And yeah, it's frustrating, but I just think that that's going to be the same route that they're going to take with Kirk Ferentz whenever he decides to conclude his career.
Yeah. So my number 4 is Brett Bielema from Illinois. Just had one of the best seasons in a long time at Illinois. The fan base, every fan base, I shouldn't say every fan base. A lot of fan bases seem to hate their coach. Even if he's good, they seem to hate him, and we'll get to one in kind of a minute. But they seem to love him. I think he's maybe the most loved coach by his own fan base in the conference right now. Now, do the other 17 like him? Probably not a lot.
Right.
I personally think he's great for college football because I like different personalities. I like guys who are willing to kind of kick the hornet's nest a little bit, the way like Lane Kiffin does, the way Steve Spurrier used to. Like, I think it's good that we don't have just like 130 robot head coaches, that we actually do have some personalities in the game. So I personally find him entertaining, but I know he's polarizing. He's kind of one of those guys where if he's your coach, everyone seems to like him. If he's not your coach, very, very mixed opinions, but just had a great season. I think he's completely safe from the administration. I think the fan base loves him. And I'm baking a little bit of things into the cake here in terms of, I really like their outlook for this season. I really like the roster they have coming back. And so I don't think last year was a fluke. I think they're going to be able to probably maintain about what they did last year. Who knows? Maybe even surprise a little bit. But I think he is incredibly safe right now. And I think things would have to go in the tank pretty badly for about a 3-year stretch for anything there to happen. Chip, I know he's a little bit further down the list for you. We'll get to that, but your initial, just quick thought on that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I agree with everything you said about, I love how polarizing he can be. I know that when he was at Wisconsin, the Badger fans loved him. Now that he's at Illinois, the Badger fans have a completely different perspective on him. I know Ohio State fans are usually more in the against mindset. Certainly when it comes to, South Carolina fans, I'm sure that they have very vocal thoughts on him. He is one of those guys that it was difficult for me to find. I agree completely, Mark, that I think he's very safe. And I think Illinois is poised based on who they have coming back and the schedule and all that to have another good season. And I also believe that when it comes to just looking at my notes here, that it looks like a $29 million buyout. If I'm correct, I don't think the Illinois administration would want to pay that. I also know that Illinois is kind of recognizing the fact that, they were kind of wandering, aimlessly. And now that they've got a guy that is delivering for them on the field, I cannot imagine them wanting to get rid of him. But he is further down just simply based on just the numbers. I think he's completely safe now, like you said, not only for this season, but for seasons to come.
All right. Number 5, safest seat in the Big Ten right now. Chip, who do you have?
I'm going with Matt Rule simply because of the contract buyout, the $56 million. That I realize that how boring and stale that is for me to keep saying it, but I'm just trying to think of when you read about all the challenges and difficulties that colleges and universities are facing with the reality of having to pay athletes, and then just thinking about, when it comes to potential buyouts, having to stomach writing that's kind of where I come from. And I think Matt Rule, kind of the administration in Nebraska, recognizing that, it's been a good 20-year process of when they let go, they basically threw the Tom Osborne way of doing things out the window, and then they've been struggling to figure out like how to get back to where they used to be back in the 90s and early 2000s. So with Matt Rule getting them to a bowl game for the first time, as well as that contract buyout, I think he kind of I think he has a lot of latitude.
Yeah, I agree. He's pretty safe. He was tough to place for me, and I'll get to that in a minute. I'll kind of explain that in a minute when we get to him on my list. But this is probably a little higher than I would have him. I'll say this: like my next guy is like cutting off that first tier for me.
Yeah,
like my top 5 for me was like my tier 1 basically. So I wouldn't have Rule in my tier 1. He's not in my like bottom tier either, but I just, and I'll get into my reasoning here on that in a few minutes, but that's one where we're a few spots off. My number 5, and we're a couple spots off here as well. My number 5 is James Franklin from Penn State. And again, that's my top tier now. Those first 5 for me are the top tier. I think he bought himself quite a bit of leeway with the season they just had. His critics are going to say that they got as far as they should have got based on the bracket. And, that's fair. But he still got there. Like there's guys who had teams just as talented as his team that weren't able to put that type of run together. So, you have to give him some credit there. I think he got the fan base a little bit off his back. Why is he at the bottom of my tier 1 instead of maybe ahead of a couple of guys like, Bielema or Signetti? Well, he's got a lot of pressure on him this year. And I wouldn't say it's quite to the level of the pressure Ryan Day had on him last year, but it's similar. Like he has a lot of guys who decided to come back. He goes out and throws, $3 million plus a year at Jim Knowles to come in and coordinate the defense. Your quarterback's got 1 billion starts under his belt. You got the 2 stud running backs. You got a pretty good offensive line. He lost some guys on defense, but he's still some disruptors on defense. Good secondary, in my opinion, good corners. So like the expectations this season of Penn State are maybe as high as they've been in a long time. And they're always high there. It's not like Penn State's expectations are high. They always are. But it really feels like for the first time in a while, Penn State fans are going into this season with almost you have to get to the national championship game type of mindset. And that could lend itself to me dropping him a little bit if it becomes clear during the season that that's not going to happen. This can change. Like I said, he's in a very similar spot, I think, to like what Ryan Day was in last year, where he got all those guys to come back. They added a few guys from the portal, and it was kind of like a national championship or bust kind of mindset around the program. And if you don't meet those expectations, you can go from darling to outcast pretty quickly. So he is right on that tier 1, tier 2 bubble for me. And again, could skyrocket right up to the top of this list if they go to the national championship game, or if they go 9-3 or something, or the first round exit or something like that. I think he could drop from here based on what some of my middle tier guys do. But that was my reasoning for Franklin.
Well, I completely agree with what you said. It's comparable to the Ryan Day expectations. And we've talked about this on previous episodes. I look at it like this, is that, okay, that $56 million buyout had me really struggling. When we talked earlier at the beginning of this, I was, in terms of struggling, like I'm thinking there's no way that Penn State would want to pay $56 million to James Franklin and all of that. But then what weighed on my decision to have him, I want to emphasize that even though it's just by the sheer numbers that I have him in a, I guess you could say, a warmer seat, but I know that he is safe. I have every confidence in it. That I think what's going to your point, Mark, I think the schedule is going to be either their biggest ally or their biggest enemy. And what I mean by that is we already talked about Oregon at the end of September. Penn State hosts Oregon. The expectation on James Franklin and that team is when Oregon comes into our place that we are going to beat them and we're going to show them that we are the best team in the Big Ten. And we all know that Penn State goes to Ohio State in November. So it's just well positioned for Penn State fans to have, like you said, those high expectations. We need to be competing for the national championship. But to your point, which I agree with, the schedule can either work for or against them in many ways. So I think, just speaking for myself, he's going to be one of these guys. I think the way you put it, it's like, things can change throughout the year. I think James Franklin, the temperature on him could possibly fluctuate to icy cold to very hot, maybe not very hot, warmer. I don't want to misspeak on what I just said, but I think that the expectations are going to weigh heavily on Penn State.
Yeah, no question. So those are our top 5. Now we get into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
This is where it got just silly. Number 6, Chip, who you got?
Okay. I'm going to go with Jedd Fisch purely on the contract buyout, and maybe I'm mistaken on this. So again, if any Washington fans see this and say, Minnich, I don't know where you got those numbers, but a $40 million buyout looms kind of large to me. And we've talked about this when we were looking at Washington in one of our previous episodes. I think this is a year where Washington fans, the expectations of, all right, coach, show us what you got. This, we're going to cut you some slack based on what you did last year. The fact is, our first year in the Big Ten. Now you can show us what a Jedd Fisch Washington team should look like. So I think he has a lot of latitude.
Yeah, he was. I don't have him here. I don't have him 6. I have him a little further down. He was tough to rank.
He is,
for everything you just said. Just such a crazy year last year for Washington. Just everything they had to adjust to. I do think, though, ultimately we're talking about a program that, about a little more than a year ago at this time was playing, for a national championship, essentially. So that I think will still be fresh in people's minds. And I think people are willing to give him a pass for everything last year because of all the craziness. But I think this year is going to be okay, back to normal. Let's start winning 9-10 games again, like we did under Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah. And since we're both more on the Ohio State, even though this is around the Big Ten, we have more of an Ohio State orientation. When Ohio State travels out there, those Washington fans are going to be expecting the Huskies to represent. And so, to your point, I mean, it's all right. First year, all right, we're going to take the training wheels off. Let's go. Let's get back to national championship contention.
Yep. So I had Kirk Ferentz here, and we did talk about him. I'm not going to waste too much time on this, but my personal should their CP warm ranking would have his seat warmer than 6th, actually much warmer. But I again, they don't fire coaches. I don't get the sense he gets a lot of pressure from the administration. I sense he gets some from the fan base. But I just, at his age and buyout and everything, I agree with Chip. This just feels like he's going to be there until he retires, unless he I think he's got a couple more years maybe to do this, but they start going 4-8, back-to-back year. I think he does start to get pushed out, but
right.
I don't think he's in any real danger of being fired or even being pushed out at this point, regardless of whether that should be the case or not. So that's just that's what I came in at here with Ferentz. Again, seat would have been warmer on my own personal list, but just reading the tea leaves, reading the room on this, it just doesn't feel like his seat's that warm. So, Chip, who do we got here now at 7 for you?
Okay.
7th?
Okay. 7th, we already talked about him, but Brett Bielema, and again, I think he's completely comfortable. To me, I freely admit, maybe I overanalyze this, but I was in the back of my mind, I was weighing contract buyout and how are they doing on the field and those kind of things. And then, again, it's just more of a gut instinct type. Okay. How would, how do you really believe things are going, or how do I perceive them to be from an outsider's perspective? But I think Brett Bielema, what he's done at Illinois, what I expect them to do this coming year, I think he's completely safe.
I had him 4, and I said, my top 5 were guys that, in my opinion, cannot be fired after 2025 season, regardless of how the on-field results look, no matter what. Would take some type of off-the-field scandal or something like that. So I have Ferentz here starting off tier 2. So I'll just get ahead of this. My tier 2 is basically guys that I would be shocked if they were fired after 2025. It would have to be such an absolute disaster. I mean, we were talking, certainly missing bowl game, but even probably worse than that, probably like 8-9 losses, and the sense that you've lost the locker room. There's a lot of stuff for me that would have to go wrong for my tier 2 guys to be fired after 2025. So Ferentz led that off for me. My next guy, since we already talked about Bielema, like I said, I think Bielema's I just think he's got the backing of the fan base and the administration, and I think he's in line to have another good season. And so I think he's completely safe. So Ferentz, to me, again, would have to really just go nuts this year in a bad way. And then this next guy would be higher probably in my personal rankings, but certainly would be ahead of Ferentz in my personal rankings, but just realities of Iowa and everything had me go right below Ferentz. That's PJ Fleck from Minnesota. Again, I think Minnesota would have to go 2-10 this year, and Fleck would have to have a meltdown, public meltdown to get fired. I'm trying to drum up a reasonable scenario. As I said on our pre-spring previews, I think Minnesota's a dark horse this year. So I actually think he's going to only probably strengthen his position this year. But that's a guy who, in my opinion, does as good of a job as any coach in the Big Ten based on his program and his situation. I don't think Minnesota is an easy program to win at. And to kind of consistently put yourself in winning seasons there, I think is a respectable accomplishment. And I think, again, possible dark horse this year in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think very highly of PJ Fleck. He's not everybody's cup of tea. We've talked about that. Some of the things, and I think when you talk about Minnesota, that's another program. It sounds very comparable to what we've talked about with Indiana, what we talked about with Illinois. I think Minnesota recognizes the fact, hey, we've had winning coaches. We had it with Glenn Mason, and then we lost our way, and it was not easy to get back to. We've got a guy here that is making us competitive. We talked earlier about, with Penn State. Minnesota gave Penn State all that Penn State wanted last year, and same thing for Michigan. So Minnesota, I think, is well positioned, like you said, to have a really good year in 2025. So I don't anticipate, like you said, it would have to be some kind of a scandal, as well as poor record, that kind of thing, for PJ Fleck to really feel the heat. I think he's very comfortable and probably going to strengthen his position after 2025 if all goes well.
All right. So we are on, what are we on, 8?
That was my.
That was your 8. So that was my a perfect segue. So
yeah.
you and I were very similar mindset there with PJ Fleck. So he's my number 7 safest job in the Big Ten right now. He's your number 8. So we can just go to my number 8. And that is Greg Schiano at Rutgers. Again, to reiterate this, I'm still on tier 2, and tier 2 to me is horrible season, and maybe not scandal, but like certainly a sense that there's some type of friction between the coach and the locker room, coach and the administration, on top of a bad record, to even consider the idea that his seat would be hot. So I have Schiano as very, very safe. My personal rankings, again, would probably have him ahead of Ferentz. I would certainly have him ahead of Ferentz. So he'd be close. He'd be a little higher up probably on my personal list. But again, I just Greg Schiano and Rutgers just feel like a match.
Yeah. And I have him, for the record, I have him at 10. We already talked about, James Franklin. I have him at 9. And I said this before, I'm just going to reiterate it. It turns into when you're ranking 1 through 18, like I said, this kind of middle section, kind of what I characterize. It was like, okay, you can make an argument for, like you just said, like this person over somebody else. Greg Schiano, I've talked about this in reference to other programs. Rutgers truly lived it. Okay. They had Greg Schiano, who got them from the depths when they were in the Big East into a nationally ranked program, had them playing well. Greg Schiano left for the NFL, which was a mistake that I think Greg Schiano would freely admit that he probably shouldn't have done. And then Rutgers fell back into just complete disrepair. And now he's back I think that Greg Schiano is very, very safe. I mean, barring some kind of major scandal and the program completely falling out, I think Greg Schiano is there as long as he wants to be.
Yeah. You said your number 9
was James Franklin.
James Franklin. So like I had him 5, you had him 9.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of that's probably one of the bigger gaps that we had. Kind of go through your logic there on kind of having him like dead smack in the middle versus having him maybe in the upper third.
It was just purely the expectations. Just the high expectations and the grumbling of Penn State fans that if they're not in that national championship, I don't anticipate anything happening. I realize that it's a completely different program, but all the Ohio State fans that were so angry at Ryan Day, in the back of my mind, I said about with the contract buyout, it's the same thing at Penn State, is that I don't see Penn State wanting, especially you're talking stadium renovation and expansion and all those kind of things. And like you said, that they just shelled out money for Jim Knowles. I don't see Penn State making a change, even if they don't make it to the national championship. I think Penn State fans, you can have high expectations, but the economic realities of this, I think James Franklin is going to be there as long as everything remains on the up and up.
Yeah, I would agree with that, obviously, and had him just a little higher, but that's a fair assessment of things. Certainly the expectations there are ridiculously high. So my number 9, for me, my 9 and 10, I'll just say 9 first, but my 9 and 10 were, in my opinion, the 2 toughest for me to rank for kind of different reasons. But my number 9 is Barry Odom at Purdue because he hasn't coached a game yet. Where do we put him?
Right.
I can't put him at the top. He doesn't have more job security than Ryan Day or Dan Lanning or Kurt Signetti. I can't put him at the bottom. I can't just not rank him because that's gutless. So we gotta throw him on there somewhere. Smack in the middle for me was just, I guess my way of, I guess a little cowardly since I courage enough to rank him, but not courage enough to actually take a stand. So that's where I put him.
I don't think it's a lack of courage. I think it's just a lack of results as of right now. Yeah. And I have, when it comes to, for Barry Odom, I have him 12. And it came down to, and I apologize to any Purdue fans who see this and take exception to it. I just kind of look at it like you're coming off of a dismal performance by Ryan Walters, and they only gave Ryan Walters 2 years. And I'm not suggesting that they should have given him more time, but I'm just simply thinking that, all right, it's an extremely difficult place to win. I think that, and maybe you can correct me if I misheard you, but in some ways that you think it might be the toughest place to win in the Big Ten. So I'm just not sure how much patience Purdue, the Purdue administration has. I think that they are going to certainly be trying to give Barry Odom everything that he needs in terms of support for the program to do well. But it wouldn't surprise me if, like you said, like this can fluctuate after, year 2, year 3, that he gets closer to that hot seat list if we don't see the results on the field.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable stance. My stance would be this: when you hire a new coach, the amount of job security he has is in many ways tied to the performance of his predecessor. So Walters takes over for Braum. And, Braum wasn't like setting the world on fire, but they were competitive. And he had a couple decent years, and he had raised the bar at the program a little bit higher than it had been before, immediately before him. And it just went so far south so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think we have to stop this. We have to stop the bleeding. We have to rip the Band-Aid off, however you want to put it. We got to make a move here. Given what Odom is now taking over, all their best players transferred almost. A lot of their best, I should say a lot of their best players transferred this offseason. I think he has the ultimate freedom now. I think he's got to me, he's got 3 to 4 years almost no matter what. Barring a Hugh Jackson with the Cleveland Browns type of, a 1 win in 2 seasons type of thing. It's really, really hard to get worse than what they were under Walters, in my opinion. So I think it's almost all upside for Barry Odom at this point, which I think will afford him quite a long leash, actually. So I just think, again, I think in a vacuum chip that your stance makes more sense than mine. But just in terms of what Ryan Walters did to the program, I just, I don't know. I think he gets a little more leash here. All right. Who's your number 10, Franklin? Or
no, I had Schiano. I had Schiano at 10. I had
Franklin 9, Schiano 10.
Yes. So if I can skip over to 11, yep. And again, this is based on, just the fact that, I think they're starting to become impatient, but I think that maybe the administration is going to be more patient based on the scandals and the issues that left by his predecessor. I'm going to go with Jonathan Smith of Michigan State at 11, simply because I realize that Michigan State fans want and expect their program to be more competitive than they have been. I will simply counter that they were 1 game away from being bowl eligible with a completely brand new coaching staff. They have a dynamic quarterback. Yeah, he sometimes makes some interceptions that drive you up the wall, but I think there's a lot to be excited about. So I have Jonathan Smith on, and I guess I would say that his seat is not ice cold, in comparison to kind of like that, the most secure, but I'd like to believe that he's still in that very comfortable, barring a horrible season, barring some kind of a scandal. I think he's still extremely safe for 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to him yet on my list, obviously. He's a guy that would be higher on my personal list than he's going to be on my reading the room list, I guess.
Right.
But I generally agree with you. I think it would have to be pretty bad this year for him to be feeling it. I think, I think they're still in litigation. Are they still trying to figure out the Mel Tucker buyout, or did they actually come to an agreement? I
haven't heard. And that's the thing, is that, when I look at,
because that could impact his job security quite greatly if they're just 5-7 again this year, and if they're on the hook for a bunch of money to Mel Tucker, or if they're not, could really impact his job security over maybe the next 2 to 3 years. But as far as I know, they haven't struck an agreement on that. But
and that was and that was one of those things where it's that was going to be potentially, you're talking, courts and lawsuits and a lot of, things being said that are probably embarrassing. So I think Michigan State just wants to get through this. And like you said, some kind of a settlement. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought that I saw that Jonathan Smith, his contract buyout would only be $7 million, which is, I'm not trying to minimize, but compared to, some of the other numbers that we have previously discussed and still have to discuss, it's very manageable. I think they're just trying to dig out of everything that was so embarrassing about the Mel Tucker situation, that they want to kind of, all right, let's get behind Jonathan Smith and have him build us back up into a respectable program.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So we're on my number 10. I'll do 10 and 11 here because 10's a new one for both of us. And then 11's one that was you already talked about that we can kind of quickly gloss through, and then we'll get back to your 12. And then at the very end, we'll go through our lists. We'll just repeat our lists so everyone can remember. But number 10, this was, again, I had 9 and 10 were my two toughest to rank. And I had Barry Odom 9. My number 10 is Sharon Moore at Michigan. I don't know what to do with him. On one hand, the season Michigan had last year, even when in beating Ohio State and even in beating Alabama in the bowl game, is not going to be enough for Michigan fans long term. On the other hand, walking into, Harbaugh leaving and NCAA investigation, and you lose a bunch of guys from your national championship team, then you don't have Will Johnson due to injury, you don't have Rod Moore due to injury, like you lose some key guys. I don't think he did that bad last year. But the NCAA investigation is going on, and he's linked to it. So, what happens if the NCAA does go hard on Michigan and Sharon Moore is wrapped up in that? Well, then he gets to be the scapegoat for the Michigan administration. I've always thought there's a non-zero chance he's the patsy for Michigan in this whole thing. That you keep him around, and if you figure out that the NCAA is really going to get you, you just toss Sharon Moore under the bus, save yourselves. That's what these people do. I've seen it. Saw it happen to Jim Tressel. We've seen it happen. On the other hand, if the NCAA doesn't really do much and Moore has a good year on the field this year, he can rocket up this list. So I just don't know what to do with him. So I put him here at 10. I can argue in both ways. He's still on the tier for me that thinks he's not fireable after 2025, barring either scandal, so NCAA, big time NCAA stuff, or Michigan going 4-8. He's not fireable to me. He will have a job in 26, barring one of those two things. He's still in that tier for me.
So you mentioned earlier about a broad discrepancy. This is where, again, I'd say that this is probably the biggest one. And I freely admit, don't know how everything is going to shape up with the NCAA investigation. Like you said, he could be the scapegoat. He could basically be, I don't want to say vindicated, but maybe get a slap on the wrist. But I have him higher up on I put it on the warmer scale. And I agree with you. It's really difficult. His buyout, unless I'm mistaken, was $5 million, which is, I'm sure the contract is stipulated for cause. So in the event of NCAA investigation, that would be for cause and all those kind of things. And like you said, he got off to a rough start, even with the win versus Ohio State. I know that Michigan fans were probably expecting better results. So if they struggle again, and I'm kind of the reason why I have him as 14 on my list, so higher, in terms of the more tenuous, I'm thinking that the rumors of the NCAA investigation, I'm purely going off of the Ross Dellinger report, from a while ago on Yahoo Sports, and things that are starting to kind of come out, that it doesn't paint a good picture. Michigan's defense is kind of shaky, and I say that as an Ohio State fan, but we'll see. He might be that patsy, like you said.
Yeah, I really have a hard time ranking him on here. I've gotten out of I've never really been in the NCAA prediction business. I've gotten further and further away from it as the years have gone on, because everyone can sit there and be like, they're going to get hammered, or, or Michigan fans, they didn't do anything. It's we have seen so many shocking NCAA results in terms of their punishments or lack thereof over the years, that I just think it's very hard to know what they're actually going to do. So it's just, I just don't really, he's got some NIL backing now. They've certainly ticked that up. He signs Bryce Underwood. You can talk about the NIL figure on that, but he's Sharon Moore's the head coach, and Bryce Underwood signed with Michigan. So his recruiting is picking up. He's a good recruiter. I think that buys him a little extra wiggle room in terms of on-field results. I just think the NCAA is just the wild card here, regarding what they do. Like I said, if they come out with some big-time punishment, Michigan can throw him under the bus and get out of that. And the other thing, if we're arguing to have him have his seat very warm, it's probably the easiest of the 18 contracts to get out of for the administration. I don't think there's an easier contract to get out of in the Big Ten right now.
Right.
From a termination standpoint, buyout standpoint, I don't think there's an easier contract to get out of right now in the Big Ten. So
yeah,
that would be a reason to have him lower than what I have him. But we will see. Okay, my number 11. We already talked about him. He was actually these last two, Moore and Rule, I think are farthest apart. I think like 5 spots apart on both. I am finally getting to Matt Rule here at number 11. Would be higher on my personal. I've said this a million times on the show, on our pre-spring. I like Matt Rule. I think he was a good hire. I think he will prove to be a good hire. I do think he will figure this out to a level, maybe not a Tom Osborne level, but I think he will do better than his predecessors. But Nebraska fans want to win, and they're like, they will pull the plug on people. They pulled the plug on Scott Frost, and that was not a cheap contract to get out of, and they'll do the same thing on Matt Rule if they have to. So it was a good step in the right direction last year. They're going to expect another one this year. If Nebraska's the same or worse this year than they were last year in 20, like if they're the same or worse in 25 as they were in 24, that's going to get warm, I think. I think he's got to win, 8 games. Or at least 7, 8 regular season wins. I think he's got to get there, or he's going to start to maybe lose a little bit of support from the fan base. So to me, he's in kind of that middle ground of, he's still on my tier 2, which would have to be like a massive dumpster fire to get fired in the next 12 months. So very, 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 very likely safe, like 95% safe. But I do think there's a path where if they don't show improvement this year, where it's like, okay, this was year 3, like year 2 of Dylan Raiola, like you've had a couple years to work the portal, a couple years to recruit. Like, should we be getting better now? Why are we not better? Like, I think that starts to creep in. So I think he's safe right now. I think he needs to have a decent year.
Yeah, I obviously, like I said, I had Matt Rule, and I agree with you. I think he's a good coach. It was a very good hire by Nebraska. As I mentioned earlier, that $56 million buyout was there, and the pain of the mistake of getting rid of Frank Solich looms over Nebraska. I mean, you want to talk about something that I'm confident the good people in Nebraska, the fans there, I'm sure that they've got Steve Peterson voodoo dolls that they, why did you do this to our program? You cursed us. They've been, just kind of trying to recover from that. So I have him as very safe, but I completely understand your logic that, and I agree with you that if they turned, on Scott Frost, who is one of their own, and you want to talk about the high expectations of Nebraska fans, deservedly so, that, they thought, okay, here's a guy that gets it and he couldn't get it done. They will do the same to Matt Rule if the results don't follow. I think that Nebraska with Dylan Raiola should be better than they were in 2024, which was a bowl team. I think Matt Rule has kind of raised the expectations himself by saying we should not be excited about going to being 6-6 and going to one of these bowl games. So I think his seat can become warmer, but I definitely have him as very safe.
All right. I'll throw up our number 12s are both repeats. So we'll quickly go through 12, and then we basically have like a whole new tier of like new games with like maybe one exception. So then things will get a little bit more interesting again. So I have Jedd Fisch 12. As I said earlier, like, I think he's a good coach. I went through a lot of crap last year. I'm not really personally putting him on that hot of a seat, but he's in a situation to me where he got his 1 year of kind of free pass to do whatever whatever the results were going to be, coming off of losing their coach, losing a huge number of players to the NFL draft, losing guys to the portal, moving to the Big Ten, and now people are going to be in Washington and be like, okay, now we're going to win 9 or 10 games again, right, Jed? And so that's why I have him down here at 12 as the 12th most secure position right now. But he is the last guy in my second tier of would have to probably go like 2-10 this year. Like, would have to be an absolute disaster to get fired after 2025. Like, I see virtually no way he gets fired. Like 95% safe in 2025. Like I said, almost regardless of what happens. So that's my last guy there. Chip, I think you had Barry Odom 12.
Yep.
I talked about that. You talked about that. Anything to add there on Barry Odom being 12 for you?
I think he's got, like you said, he's got free reign in 2025, but I think the expectations will be there to let's get going. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. So 13. Chip, we'll let you go first since this is a repeat. Who is number 13 for you?
Okay, 13 for me is Deshaun Foster, and
nope. I'm sorry. I'm reading the list wrong. So yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. 13 for me is Deshaun Foster because I think he's safe, but I think the expectations are going to start to rise up. To the best of my knowledge, his buyout is extremely manageable. I might be like around $9 million, give or take, but I think that he's got so much goodwill within that administration. I think that there was so much animosity towards Chip Kelly. Fair or unfair is not for me to decide, but I think that Deshaun Foster, somebody who is a legend for UCLA football back there to try and get that program competitive, I think he's safe, but I think the expectations are going to start to rise in year 2.
No, I agree. This would be a tough guy, I think, for UCLA to depart with, even if they have a bad year this year. Just from a sentimental and just a stability standpoint, where you don't start getting into a cycle of shuffling coaches. I would bet on him long term there, even though he's down here in this realm for me too. I would bet on him long term there, but yeah, he's got some work to do there. They lost, I think, 3 NFL guys off their defensive front 7. Got some quarterback questions. Like, there's some stuff there that could make year 2 a little difficult. But I think you've got him at a pretty fair spot. So my 13, and this is now I'm in tier 3. So tier 2 is over. Tier 1 was absolutely 0% chance they get fired after 25, no matter what, barring, again, massive off-field scandal. Tier 2 for me was like 95% safe, would have to be the dumpster fire of all dumpster fires in 25 to get fired. Tier 3 is seat is warm, still some leash left, but better start showing some signs of life, or firing could be on the table. And so 13 for me, kicking off that tier for me is Lincoln Riley at USC. And quite frankly, I've talked about guys who I would have higher or have more job security in my personal list. This is a guy who I think should have less job security. I think the only reason he doesn't have less job security right now is that insane buyout, which is still like $80-some million. I think it goes down, I want to say like $7 to $10 million a year. So like every year it goes a little bit lower, but like that is an enormous amount of money. Like USC's got money. I don't think USC's got that type of money. I don't know. I don't know that USC can really fire him, but my goodness, if he goes like 4-8 or 5-7, like, don't they have to? Like, I'm trying not to put my own personal like spin on this, but it's like, you're USC. You are a blue blood. You are conservatively a top 10 program in college football, maybe a top 5 or 6 program in college football. what are you doing here? Like, you cannot continue to have these seasons. You're getting, the program's gotten worse since he got there. This is a huge year, I think, for him. And I think, again, if he doesn't show some improvement, I think that seat is getting very warm. I think it'd be much warmer if not for the buyout.
Yeah, I have him his seat warmer by comparison. And the only reason, like you said, that's kind of keeping me from putting him for the warmest is because of that. I mean, it's almost $90 million. I mean, when I looked it up, that I realized that, okay, yeah, USC, I mean, they've got high expectations, and that they were willing to, unless I'm mistaken, they were willing to buy out his contract to get him from Oklahoma to get him to USC. I just don't see, like I said, I have him on my list. I have him at 15 out of 18. So again, I have him in that. Definitely his seat is warm. I just can't picture any USC boosters wanting to spend $90 million and then having to go out and get another top tier coach on top of that. So yeah, I mean, if the bottom falls out, I could see it. And like you said, Mark, I mean, we have the flexibility to kind of move people up or down based on how the season is going. I definitely think that his seat is warm. It's very warm. I just don't see that the USC boosters writing that check.
Yeah, that would be a very tough check to write.
Yeah, can't imagine.
So they're either going to have to plant some evidence on him to be able to fire him with cause, or they're going to have to really hope that he improves this thing. So that was my 13. I'm sorry, your 13 is the retread or whatever is the repeat. I
had Deshaun Foster as my 13.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're 14. Yes, you're 14.
14. Yeah, Sharon Moore was my 14. Lincoln Riley was my 15.
Okay.
I think these last three
are the same.
Are the same.
Yep.
And I certainly have my rationale for all three of them, but I'm kind of curious to hear yours.
Yeah. So first of all, like, anything to add I think we just talked about, obviously, Moore and Foster and Riley. Anything to add there on Moore? Just, are you banking on NCAA stuff, or are you?
Yeah, I mean, I respect where you came from. It's like, I'm not in the NCAA prediction business either. I just think that it certainly, and maybe I obviously, like I allowed it to dictate my decision, but when I read through Ross Dellinger, that report, and I realized that that's one person's perspective on things, it did not look good. And the fact that Sharon Moore was implicated in that, and this still has to, we don't know. I mean, things could change. So I certainly appreciate the flexibility of being able to possibly get him, adjust where he is on that list. I think, again, the results, as well as the results on the field, as well as possibly the NCAA investigation, could certainly change where he ranks.
All right. So you had Sharon Moore 14.
Yes.
Lincoln Riley 15.
Correct.
I have Deshaun Foster 14, Jonathan Smith 15. And so Smith was kind of a different, we were a little bit different on that one. Foster, you and I were like one off. So you were right on the money with Foster. Like I said, I don't think he would get fired. I think he's in a tough spot right now. Year two could not be the progression maybe people were hoping. But I don't think that he would be fired. Even though his contract is very easy to get out of if you're UCLA. And then I have Jonathan Smith, who, again, this is one to be higher. I would have him safer than this list. I just know Michigan State fans are not the most patient. And look, it's not that long ago for them that they were winning Big Ten championships, playing Big Ten championship games, beating Ohio State in big games, going to the playoffs. Like, it wasn't that long ago. And they remember that. And so, like, they want to win. And even like Mel Tucker has like a really good first year. And like, oh, we're back. And then like, it's just been a total like clown show the last couple of years since that happened. So I get it. And so that's why I say, like, I think the contract's pretty easy to get out of if you're Michigan State. You will get fan base pressure if you don't improve this year. And he is the very last guy in my tier 3 of, I wouldn't bet on him being, I think he's very likely to still be the coach in 2026, but does need to show something to maybe ease some of the expectations or ease some of the worries of the fan base, I guess would be the best way to put it. So that's where he's at for me. They're at 15. My last 3 are tier 4, and these are guys I could see getting fired after this year if they don't show something. My last guy I think is a dead man walking. The first 2 I'm not sure about, but these are 3 guys I could reasonably see being fired if they don't show something this year. And we have the same 3, so we'll just do this in order. Number 16, Luke Fickell, Wisconsin. Chip, your thoughts there?
On a personal note, and I don't have the personal relationship that you have with Luke Fickell, but I do respect Luke Fickell. I will always have a tremendous amount of respect for him, not only as a player, like the fact that he, I think back to when he was, at nose guard and playing with a torn pectoral muscle in the Rose Bowl. But what he did in 2011 in very, very difficult circumstances as an Ohio State assistant during everything, the aftermath of Tattoo-gate. So he earned my infinite respect for the way he handled himself during that. That being said, I have not been shy about being critical of what I consider just completely, unnecessary self-inflicted mistakes that he has made since he's come over to Wisconsin. He I'm just going to say that he threw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of his decision to junk what was, if a boring but successful offensive philosophy that had been proven to be right since the Barry Alvarez era began in 1990. And now it has led him into, kind of being at a crossroads. Now he has a $40 million buyout, and I'm kind of the mindset that I don't see Wisconsin really wanting to do that, especially considering that they had buyouts associated with Paul Chryst. So I think he is okay, but I realize we're going to talk about Wisconsin later on this spring. They have a very tough schedule in 2025. So his seat, if it's not hot now, is definitely going to be extremely hot going into 2026. I think he's going to be okay, but boy, does he have to show results.
Yeah, I think this is a huge year for him. So obviously Wisconsin wants this to work. Like they do not want to have to change coaches again. But like you said, so much of this has been self-inflicted with the coaching hires, cleaning house when he got there. I would have moved mountains to keep Jim Leonhard. I guess that was going to be, I don't know, too many cooks in the kitchen on defense or too different philosophically or whatever. Jim Leonhard is now like a rising star in the NFL, probably going to be a head coach somewhere soon. Like I think that was a mistake. Certainly the Phil Longo hire was a disaster as offensive coordinator. And he didn't take over a program in disarray.
Right.
Like Barry Odom and Jonathan Smith and
Deshaun Foster
to a certain extent. Yeah, but some of these, Matt Rule, some of these coaches took over just horrendous situations. Luke Fickell, they fired Paul Chryst in the middle of a season where they were 2-3. They had just won 9 games the year before. Like Paul Chryst was, as I look here, 67-26 at Wisconsin when they fired him. And I'm not even saying they shouldn't have fired him. It was obviously the program had peaked at about year 4 under him, and it was starting to go down a little bit. So I respect that. You get out ahead of that before you let it get away from you. But that shows me what the expectations are there. Like they fired a guy coming off a 9-win season in the middle of a season where he had just won 9 games the previous year. So the idea that they wouldn't fire Luke Fickell if he goes like 5-7 this year is, to me, like, they would pay the buyout. I think they would find a way to pay the buyout. They would find a way to do it. I think he's got to have a winning season and give people something to be looking forward to the year after. Now, I think they've done okay in the portal. I think the Jeff Grimes hire was a really good one. It's like, well, you maybe done this before, you might not be in this situation right now. So I think there are things here. That's why I've got him above a couple other guys. Like, I think there are things here that will allow Fickell to escape that possibly, but they're going to have a tricky schedule again this year. And they still have to figure out, the quarterback thing. Like, okay, like Billy Edwards Jr., that's fine. Like, who are your stars on offense? Like, who can you really rely on? I think there's a lot to figure out there. And so I think he's in a tough spot. I really do. I think he's in a tough spot. I think he did act in time to possibly get this turned around, but if he doesn't get it turned around quickly, I look, again, they have shown they will fire you in the middle of a season with a 67-26 career record at the school. They will fire you. This is a program that has really big expectations and should have big expectations. It's been a very good program the last 30, 40 years. So he's got to get on it.
Well, the athletic director, I think, would be going along with him.
Correct.
Like you said, the Wisconsin administration wants this so badly to work because it's looking so disastrous in terms of, like you said, we fired a coach that had a winning record. Granted, like you said, maybe it had plateaued, but the fact that they had Jim Leonard there in the interim, that maybe they could have the enthusiasm
head coach even.
The enthusiasm there might have been I think the fans would have been like, okay, like we just need like a fresh coat of paint on the offensive side of things, and Jim Leonard is the guy. But the fact that, like you said, they went out, got Luke Fickell, I think Jim Leonard probably, my belief is that Jim Leonard just kind of felt like, I just don't feel comfortable being here, and decided to hit the road himself. But yeah, I mean, I think the athletic director is going to, you want to talk about somebody that's like has fingers crossed and toes crossed that this works out well, because I think he's probably feeling the pressure if this doesn't work out with Luke Fickell as well.
No question. So that's like the first guy for me that's like, okay, this guy's legitimately needs to show something this year. Number 17, our second hottest seat, Chip.
I've genuinely felt bad just from the perspective that I think he inherited a difficult situation, but I'm just looking at the realities of this expanded Big Ten. I'm going to go with David Braun of Northwestern here, that he came in, deservedly was the Big Ten Coach of the Year in, coming in as the interim, and then he earned the full-time job after everything that happened. We were talking earlier about the Mel Tucker situation. That Pat Fitzgerald situation, to the best of my knowledge, hasn't been resolved. That being said, Northwestern, they regressed demonstrably in year 2. And I look at, all right, offensively, and this goes back to the Pat Fitzgerald era, they really haven't figured out what they're doing at quarterback. I think they really struggle. I think the expanded Big Ten is doing them no favors. And oh, by the way, we're going to be opening up a brand new stadium. It just seems that he needs to have a good year, because I could see the administration saying, you know what, let's start everything brand new with our new stadium, a new coach. We'll have some enthusiasm for that. And I could see them going out and getting a new coach to usher in their new era in their new stadium.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the new stadium. They've got the brand new, beautiful lakeside facility. They're going to build the new stadium there. And they're not going to want to go into that situation with like a lame duck head coach. They definitely regressed this past year. We'll do a post-spring schedule analysis. Like, spoiler alert, probably not going to be very kind to them when I do it. It doesn't look like a team that's got a lot of penciled-in wins on its schedule. especially in the Big Ten next year. I could see this being another tough year. They were 4-8 last year. You run it back and go 4-8, 3-9 again. That could be it. I don't think it's a tough contract to get out of. And so I think with the new money being put into the stadium and everything, they're going to want a better return on their investment into the program. So, yeah, I think he's got to improve in some way this year. Can they get to 5 or 6 wins? I don't know. Does 4-8 buy him another year? And then it's like, okay, last chance. Do you fire him at 3-9 or 2-10? Probably. So we'll see. But I think his seat's very warm as well. And again, I think you really did hit the nail on the head there with they're going to have some level of excitement building for this program going to that new state. You don't want to, hey, we're coming off 2-10 with a lame duck head coach. Come support our new stadium, but our stadium's going to be really cool, guys. We promise. You want to have some excitement there. So, yeah, for all those reasons, I think his seat's pretty warm. Number 1 warmest seat in the conference. I think he's dead man walking. We'll see. Mike Locksley. Chip?
Well, he's had success when you look at 2021, they were 7-6, 2022 and 2023, he was 8-5. But they fell to 4-8. And I mentioned it a few moments ago. I think the expanded Big Ten is not doing programs like Maryland any favors. I mean, yeah, you no longer are in the Big Ten East. Oh, by the way, you might get to play Oregon, USC. I mean, like it's, one of these things where, okay, be careful what you wish for kind of a thing. The talent within that area, Maryland, Washington, D.C. area, that so much talent is available that he has to be able to keep that at home. I just can't see the local talent wanting to stick around for a guy that might be showing his walking papers. So like you said, I think maybe he pulls a rabbit out of his hat or something, but I just don't see Maryland going into 2025 with Mike Locksley, 2026 at the helm, barring some kind of unforeseen superb season.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line here, it's not trending in the right direction. 7-6, 8-5, 8-5, 4-8. You go 1-8 in the Big Ten. You haven't had a winning record in the Big Ten yet. It's been 6 seasons. Your best effort in the Big Ten is 4-5. A lot of these wins, like if you look at their wins, they're beating like Towson. Like they're padding their stats early. Like you go to 2022, 4-5 in the Big Ten for an 8-5 record. Well, you padded your stats with your 3 preseason wins. Same thing in 23. Same thing in 21. You were 3-6. You went 7-6, but you were 3-6 in the Big Ten. You padded your stats in that preseason schedule, and now you go 1-8 in the Big Ten last year for a 4-8 record. Again, padding your stats against the Towsons of the world. And I look at your roster coming back, and like I don't see where they're going to be favored in any of their Big Ten games.
Right.
And so, like, if they throw up another 1-8 in the Big Ten, like, at what point are you just like, okay, like this has run its course? I think it has to be. And so, like, his buyout, if they would have fired him this offseason, his buyout was like $12 million. So that's going to go down. I mean, that's going to go down under $10 million. You can get out of that.
Yeah.
You can get out of the contract. Yes, they're starting to throw a little NIL money at some of these in-state guys. So maybe his hope is that, well, I've got Zion Ely committed and, I'm still in it for Manny Iheanacho. These are 5-star players. One's an offensive tackle. Ely's a defensive end. Iheanacho's an offensive tackle. Like, maybe that buys him some type of time to like, well, maybe if he can sign those guys, we let this go another year. But like, I'm projecting them to go like 4-8 at best, 2-10 maybe at worst this year. And if that's the case, if you're 1-8 in the Big Ten or 0-9 in the Big Ten, like I don't see how that's going to keep his job. I think he's dead man walking unless they really surprise me this year with their on the field performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, his success, and I agree with you. I think it was padded on non-conference wins. And all right, Taulia Tagovailoa, who is no longer there. I mean, he did run out of eligibility. It's amazing that, you want to talk about like good to the last drop in terms of like squeezing every possible ounce of magic that young man had offensively. But I've always looked at Maryland. It's like you said, it's like, okay, they get off to a good start, and then it's just they just kind of, they hold on for dear life to get to magic number 6 for bowl eligibility, and they can't do that anymore in the expanded Big Ten. I'm not saying it's completely impossible, but the likelihood of being able to get to the necessary wins in the Big Ten with the level of competition increasing as a result of like the West Coast expansion. I just don't see how Maryland wants to keep going down the same path. Maybe they do, but I'd be surprised if they do in 2026.
Yeah, I think, again, as you've mentioned, I think the conference is even tougher now.
Yeah.
Like they used to they'd win, they beat Towson and Buffalo and Charlotte, and they bring those 3 or 4 wins and the 3 wins in a conference play. And then it's like, well, if we can just beat Indiana and we beat Rutgers, right. and we
so now you're at 5.
Now we steal one against an Illinois or a Minnesota or something like that.
Okay.
And now Illinois is better.
Right.
Rutgers is better. Indiana's way better. Minnesota's kind of found some footing with like, where are your wins? If you don't draw like Northwestern or Purdue, where are your wins in this conference? So it's a tough spot. I don't know that he's going to make it. Like I said, I would suspect he's probably not the coach in 2026. I don't suspect they're going to have a good year. I don't have any reason to believe they're going to have a good year. They lose Roman Hemby in conference. They lose their quarterback. They didn't have a great quarterback situation to begin with. Now they lose their quarterback in conference. Their stud 1,000-yard receiver is off to the NFL. Where is the talent coming from to pull off a 6-6 type of season? So I don't know. We'll see, but that's my number 18. That's my hottest seat in the Big Ten. That's Chip's hottest seat in the Big Ten. Chip, let's just real quick, just reel off again from least hot to hottest seat. What is your 1 through 18? Just go down the list, and then I'll go down mine.
Okay, from least hot to hottest. Number 1, Ryan Day. Number 2, Dan Lanning. Number 3, Curt Cignetti. Number 4, Kirk Ferentz. Number 5, Matt Rule. Number 6, Jed Fish. Number 7, Brett Bielema. Number 8, PJ Fleck. Number 9, James Franklin. Number 10, Greg Schiano. Number 11, Jonathan Smith. Number 12, Barry Odom. Number 13, Deshaun Foster. Number 14, Sharon Moore. Number 15, Lincoln Riley. Number 16, Luke Fickell. Number 17, David Braun. And the hottest seat, number 18, we just talked about, Mike Locksley of Maryland.
All right. And like I said, we have a bunch of the same, like at the top and the bottom, but in the middle, it gets a little crazy. I have from most safe to least safe. So coolest seat to hottest seat in the Big Ten. 1, Ryan Day. 2, Dan Lanning. 3, Curt Cignetti. 4, Brett Bielema. 5, James Franklin. 6, Kirk Ferentz. 7, PJ Fleck. 8, Greg Schiano. 9, Barry Odom. 10, Sharon Moore. 11, Matt Rule. 12, Jed Fish. 13, Lincoln Riley. 14, Deshaun Foster. 15, Jonathan Smith. 16, Luke Fickell. 17, David Braun. And again, last, Mike Locksley. So that is our Coach Big Ten hot seat rankings heading into spring football. We will update these regularly. I don't know when the next update will be. We could probably argue to do it over the summer if enough things have happened via, I don't know, transfer portal or spring football or whatever may happen. There may be enough there to revisit this before the season, but certainly this is something we'll update at least twice during the regular season and certainly right after again as things play out. So we'll be able to revisit these. A lot of these guys do have the ability to move up or down. There's very few spots here that I think are kind of set in stone at this point, especially in that middle area. But hope everyone enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments if you enjoyed this. It's one of our longest episodes, so it's a longer watch or listen. But if everyone enjoyed it, let us know. Again, let us know what we got right, what we got wrong, what your opinions are on this, and who's on your personal hot seat and where the head coach of your favorite team stands and in your mind. So let us all know in the comments. But thanks for watching and listening, and we will catch you guys again here with another episode soon.